I think I'm going to surprise a lot of people with the skill set that I do have, and that the mainstream crowd that has not seen my fights overseas, I think they're going to be.
You've been tearing it up internationally for many years, particularly in Japan. It's been a long time coming, man. I've been waiting for this for so many years. What was it like getting that call?
Well, I was actually sitting at a Korean barbecue when I got the call, and I was stuffing my face, and they said, "Hey, yo, can you make the weight?" And I said, "Yeah, bro, let's do this." So this is your opponent, Raoni Barcelos. I said, "Shit, that's gonna be a tough one. Let's fucking do it." So I was excited to get the call, but my fight career has never been easy, and it's never been I've never had a really easy fight. So yeah, I was like, yeah, why not? This is just the same, a different opponent, but same situation.
You're right, man. If you go back and look at the fights you've taken, and I've mentioned that earlier internationally, you've kind of seeked out challenges. You know what I mean? A lot of guys are not seeking out challenges. They want to stay home in their little region and fight, pick and choose, but you haven't been doing that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I really don't see the value in doing that. I mean, when you do that to a certain point, you end up just becoming a bully. And I understand people want to make, they want to have an undefeated career, or they want to get to a certain show, and they want to, of course, they want to do well. But what happens when you get to the UFC 9-0, and people are looking at you like, wow, he's 9-0, but you haven't really fought anybody. And then all of a sudden, here comes a guy who maybe doesn't have as an impressive record. Maybe they're sitting cool at 13-3, 13-4, or whatever, and but they've been fighting some tough and bad motherfuckers. And then you go in there, and then, well, who you got? You got the guy who's got 13-4, or you got this undefeated guy. But one guy's been fighting real gangsters around the world. So when of course, throughout the years, as I've been fighting and picking up challenges, these are just accolades that I pick up, experiences that I pick up, and like I said, man, I want to fight the best, and right now UFC is giving me an opportunity to fight theirs.
For sure. And, going back to the international experience, man, that you have accumulated, it's been astonishing. What were the main takeaways for you from those experiences that you can take into the octagon?
Man, mainly doubts that people have against me. Like, I get it, like people, there are MMA analysts out there where like, okay, well, Victor Henry has landed this many strikes in this many fights, significant strike this, defended downs that. They have, I understand there are those people, but there are also those people who only do that in the UFC. You would be surprised where it's like, oh, well, Raoni Barcelos has every possible advantage imaginable. And I'm just like, really? Like, as it sits, I got more fights than him. I fought some pretty tough guys, I'd like to think. He's fought some pretty tough guys. Like I said, like I don't think that Raoni Barcelos was was going to be an easy matchup at all. I know he was going to be a very tough matchup, just like they all are. But it was surprising to me to see how many people were just sweeping me under the rug as if I had been fighting chumps my entire career. And all of a sudden now I'm going to fight somebody tough. Like, no, like every fight is a fight. Anything can happen in any fight. But I'm thinking to myself, really, guys? Like, you guys really think that I'm just going to get walked on? That's crazy. I also understand, though, there's like, okay, well, Victor Henry's coming in and he has this many losses, and he's coming in on a short notice fight against a very tough opponent. We'll see what happens. But they weren't doing that. They were doing the whole Raoni Barcelos is Jesus Christ, and he's just gonna totally murk Victor Henry. And I was like, well, you guys are in for a rude awakening. Unfortunately, come the day of the fight, tested positive for COVID and had no symptoms and anything. But I understand that the UFC has to cover their bases, and they couldn't allow that fight to go forward. So, yeah, I'm just glad that I have my health. I'm glad that Raoni Barcelos didn't catch anything. That if I unfortunately had COVID, I'm glad that he didn't take it back to Brazil to his family, and he was able to have himself a good Christmas. I apologize to him personally online. I obviously I couldn't go see anybody because UFC was had me on quarantine, but I apologize to him because, well, that's my duty.
Let's get into Hyon Barcelos, man. He is a tough, gritty mainstay of the division. 5-1 record, man. Real tough guy. What type of fighter do you see though, in particular, in the Brazilian?
Well, I mean, I see that he's going to be, I don't want to put everybody in a bubble, but Brazilians are fast, explosive. They're resilient. They are, generally have suspect cardio, but I don't see him having too much of a suspect cardio. I think, of course, everybody's cardio is bad in the third round, because you're supposed to be fighting the entire time. If you got great cardio in the third round or the fifth round and you're feeling all right, that probably means that you haven't been pushing very hard. You're supposed to be going out there and trying to finish people, not kind of just playing it safe and everything. That doesn't put you on the map for anything, But I think his boxing is great. Of course, he's a 5-time Brazilian national wrestling champion. No, and he's fought a lot of great guys. So he's one of those guys that's seen a lot of combat, seen a lot of looks out of a lot of different people. This fight would have been great, and I suspect that if we do meet in the future, that it's going to be a great fight.
You've had little less than a month to prepare. What does preparations look like with such limited time?
It's the same. It really doesn't change very much. There's game plans against people, but like Mike Tyson said, people's got a plan until you get socked in the face. You got to prepare for what people are good at, but you also have to prepare. You have to really refine what you're gonna do and what you're good at. You can't go and just develop a whole new skill set just because you got one certain fight ahead of you. You gotta spend the years rather, refining your skill set, getting better just as a martial artist. And then when you do have a fight, kind of move things around a little bit, but you shouldn't only be planning to fight one person at one point. You got to be ready to fight everybody, because things like this can happen where somebody drops off, but somebody else is available and now they're a completely different fighter. What would have happened if the unfortunate happened and maybe Hyon got injured or got COVID, but somebody else stepped up. So instead of fighting a boxer wrestler, I'm fighting a jiu-jitsu kickboxer. So you gotta really prepare for it all, man.
Definitely. At this point in your career, it's more about making the adjustments in the fight, do you think, compared to like just building your skill set?
Absolutely. Like making adjustments mid-fight is a very important skill. Some people they stick to the game plan, which is great, especially if you got to go through fire and blood just to make your one game plan happen, especially if it takes a couple rounds to make it happen. But being able to switch game plans and then come back to plan A, that's important also. I spent a lot of years in my fighting profession to improve all the skill sets in my repertoire, and I've had to prove that. Sometimes my takedowns just not working. Sometimes your striking just not working. Things sometimes just don't work. So you gotta be able to go to plan B and then circle around to plan A again. Sometimes you gotta use plan B or C to make plan A work.
Yeah, you've seen that sometimes, even in the UFC, where guys only have one game plan and that doesn't work, and it almost looks like desperation sits in, and then they're just, let's say, fucked.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you want to look at, I mean, not a lot of people saw this. The Volkanovski versus Ortega fight, the second one. I don't know how Volkanovski got out of that guillotine. I'm convinced he breathes through his asshole. Like that was a real tight guillotine. And what ended up happening? Of course, probably Ortega burned his arm out for a while, but I believe that Brian Ortega was a professional and did his training and conditioning, so he wasn't absolutely done. But the wrestling and the submission game was not working. But a lot of people didn't really notice that when Brian Ortega had went to southpaw and started throwing straight lefts, he was nailing Volkanovski. Maybe they didn't see it. maybe I'm just overanalyzing. Maybe I'm just tripping. But if you go back and you look at that fight, every, almost every time Brian Ortega went southpaw through that straight left, Volkanovski didn't really see it, and it clipped him, and it made him move just a little bit less. It had, in my opinion, if Brian Ortega would have stayed that path and started using that left-handed southpaw, he could have used that to get to the grappling to eventually catch a submission. Although it's going to be hard to catch Volkanovski if he breathes out of his asshole and has just amazing guillotine defense, man. I was screaming at that, but you know, that only goes to show why Volkanovski is the champion at 45.
Yeah, definitely. One of the craziest moments of the year, man. I cannot believe
Yeah.
that even happened. And he was losing the
Yeah.
fight until that point. It was just like that's what's crazy about this, sport where it's like you could lose the whole fight for like 3-4 rounds and then in a moment get that submission, get the knockout. That's why we love it.
Yeah, man. I mean, who is it? The Korean Zombie versus who? I forget.
Yair?
Yair Rodriguez. We did that up. Yeah, when they did that up elbow, it was like, oh, okay, we're just doing magic now. We're doing magic moves.
Yeah, it is magic, man. And speaking of magic, man, what do you expect? How do you expect to win your first fight, man, in the UFC, man? Everybody that knows you, they expect a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know myself. I'm gonna go in there. I honestly think that when I go in there and I finally do get my first opportunity to actually fight in the UFC, I think I'm gonna surprise a lot of people with the skill set that I do have, and that the mainstream crowd that has not seen my fights overseas, I think they're gonna be really surprised, man. I mean, I know I got cardio. Um, my submission game is on point. My striking game is on point, and I'm only getting better, even though I'm ancient and old in fighting years. But I believe I'm only getting better. I'm getting more irritating and hateful. So I think I'm gonna be all right, man.
Well, do you feel like you're hitting the UFC in your prime? Some guys hit the UFC at 25, 24, not really ready, maybe not even close to their prime. For you, you've went through the fire. Right now is the perfect time.
You know what? I honestly do believe that in right now at 34 years old, that 34-year-old Victor can whoop the hell out of a 27-year-old Victor. So, um, physical prime, probably not. Mental prime, well, that's where it counts. You can be a star athlete and bench press 1,000 pounds, but if you ain't got it in your head, then you ain't got shit.
All right, a couple more questions before I let you go.
What's up, bud?
What do you think MMA fans obsess about too much that fighters really don't care about?
It's a two-part question, man. Of course, fighters they a lot of them wouldn't do this for free. They wouldn't fight on camera in front of a lot of people. They wouldn't do it for free. Um, I think a lot of people underestimate the world outside of the major organizations. You have, of course, you have you have Ryzen, you have RCC, now you got Ego FC. I mean, you have a lot of fighting organizations that have some solid people. I think the general populace would do well if there aren't MMA fans to watch other organizations, see how other people do. Of course, in those organizations, you have those people that are not very good, and they're coming up and they're trying to make a name for themselves. So people are quick to dismiss them. But you also have the people that are real gangsters, that are training hard, training with fighters, and it shows in their skill set. You know, um, as far as the fighters who really don't care. I mean, hey man, I trained with UFC fighters in the gym, in small gyms, in big gyms, and the only thing that I notice is that generally speaking, the the professionals that are more driven are fighting in the bigger organizations, obviously, but they have their crew with them, and those people are the ones that they care about. You have your people coming in and out of the gym, kind of like maybe they're there a couple weeks or whatever, and then they're gone or whatever. But I know I got myself a solid group, and they're getting me ready all the time. And a lot of them are not in the UFC, but they are solid people. They fight in other organizations, and sometimes, they don't get their shot, or and it sucks that they don't get their shot, but they are there for me. So as far as from a fighter's perspective, I can only answer for me. I really don't care what organization my teammates fight for, as long as they better, because by them getting better, I get better.
And there's some guys that don't even fight that are training partners of high level dudes.
Yes, I know one guy, and he trains over at Fight Academy, and the dude he's doing his thesis on it's sports physiology and all that stuff. And the dude doesn't even fight, and I'm just like, bro, like, you got skills, like, why don't you fight? Like, not my thing. But his brother fights, all his teammates fight, and I'm just like, bro, like, you got skills, and it's crazy to think that he has no interest in it. And I'm just like, yeah, that's cool. That's cool if you have that kind of skill and not have that interest, but still have the interest in martial arts.
PTSD in combat sports, injuries, bad weight cuts, damage, losses. Have you experienced it in the past, or have you seen it in other fighters around you?
Oh, absolutely. There was one fight I had over in Japan where there was a cancel. We missed a flight. I missed a day. And then of course, when we did make the next day, we made it to the flight. We sat on the tarmac the first time, hours. And then they canceled the flight. So, of course, that sucked. And then they sent us to another gate where we sat on another plane for about 3 hours before they canceled that flight. And they said, okay, well, we're going to have to schedule guys for tomorrow morning. And we're like, no, we got to be in the air tonight. Like, it's got to happen tonight. And then they were like, well, the only thing we can do is fly you to China. And then from there, you'll have like a couple hour layover, and then we'll fly over to Japan. Well, I had 17 pounds at that point, and I'm just like, well, this sucks. So on the plane, of course, you can't eat anything, and you're in the air and you're bloated because of the water retention from the air. I land in China, and I start running up and down the aisles of the Chinese airport, cutting weight. And of course, after that, all right, load up. You're going to Japan. Boom. And as soon as I land, I had maybe 13 more pounds to lose in a few hours. So that was a shitty weight cut. That was a very shitty weight cut. I ended up losing that fight, but it wasn't. I tried to stay as mentally strong as possible. There's no way to measure how much of that experience played into my fight, because I fought my butt, and I think I believe I won that fight. But it was funny because even Josh wrote in a detailed and breakdown of my fight to the Japanese commission of me having more control time, me landing more significant strikes, more ring control time, all that, and they still called me the loser by split decision. Well, even after all that, they maintained their decision, which sucks. But that was a very hard weight cut. That was very terrible. Of course, as far as losses go, losses are losses. There's always an excuse, and then you get a lot of fighters that say, oh, well, I'm not making any excuses, but my foot was on backwards or whatever. Losses happen, for a variety of reasons, but you go out there and you fight to the best of your ability. Josh Barnett has fought with food poisoning. I fought with not with food poisoning, being sick. I fought when, of course, some people, they don't want to tell you, or some organizations rather, I won't name them, but they don't tell you what time or when weigh-ins are. They just say, okay, show up on weight, and you're like, okay, yeah, when is the weigh-in and at what time? And they don't tell you nothing. I had to find out from other fighters. So I've experienced that. Being in the back warming up and them not even staging you. All of a sudden it's like, Victor, you're up, and you hear your music playing and you're like, what's this? Like, and they don't even tell you that you're going to be up in 3 fights. They don't even tell you that. They just have, oh, hey, you're up. I was like, okay. So you're not even warmed up properly, and you go out there and you have a fight. So, there's always something. There's always something. But that's why I meant when I told you, being in your physical prime is good. Being in your prime mentally is what really matters. Because if you can go through all that, still still go out there and be mentally prepared to have yourself a nice fist fight, you'll be all right.